He said it softly, like a kindness you're supposed to be grateful for. Mom, wouldn't it be nice to have your own space? That's how exile sounds these days, polite, clean, and smiling. It doesn't slam a door, it shows you a brochure. I was standing in my own kitchen when Evan said it. Morning light was coming in sideways, turning the dust into glitter. And for a second the whole room looked like it remembered me. My coffee had gone cold. The mug still said "World's Best Mom" in a chipped, childish font, as if a decade-old gift could argue with the present and win. Lena leaned against the counter like she'd practiced the pose. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect tone. We've been thinking, Margaret, she said, all warm vowels and tidy compassion. You deserve somewhere peaceful, your own routine, your own freedom. Freedom. It sat between us like a plant that had never been watered. Evan kept going because my son is good at finishing the things that will hurt me. You know the stairs have been hard since your knee. And the noise, my hours. Lena's calls. It's not fair to you. My hand went tighter around the mug. I did not look at the stairs. I did not look at the family photos on the wall either. The ones that still had John's face in them. My husband's smile caught forever in cheaper light. The frames were dusted. Lately, it wasn't my hands doing the dusting. Is this about last night? I asked. Because It's not about any one thing. Lena cut in, gentle but surgical. We're just planning ahead. We found a lovely studio. Closer to the park you like. Elevator building. Safe. Sunlight. You'll love it. The word studio hit me like a small door closing. The kind that clicks sweetly and locks from the outside. On the table lay a neat stack of printouts I had not been invited to read. Floor plans in glossy ink. Pastel staging, white sofa. Tidy books. A plant that would die in 2 weeks if someone didn't care. A leasing office address. A move-in date circled in pen that wasn't mine. You've already? I started. Just penciled. Evan said too fast. He smiled the way boys do when they're trying to hand you the medicine and make you say thank you. You always say you don't like last-minute decisions. I looked at my son. And in his face I could still see the boy who used to stand on a chair to stir pancake batter. Streaks of flour in his hair. He had my eyes and John's jaw and a stranger's patience for this moment. A place of your own. Lena repeated, like a chorus. No clutter, no noise. Your show's at your volume. Breakfast when you want it. Isn't that nice? That word, nice. It's what people say when they've already decided who you're going to be. On the counter sat a cardboard box I hadn't seen last night. The label in black marker read guest room, keep. A second box said guest room, donate. The third said guest room, storage. The handwriting was neat, foreign, a system made by someone who had tested how quickly I would agree to anything if the boxes were already taped. My room had not been called my room in months. It had been called the guest room in a tone that didn't invite guests. Evan reached across the table and slid the top printout nearer. Miss Cole, he said, suddenly formal in a way that made me colder than the coffee. You'll be on the 7th floor. The view is west-facing. It's quieter. Mom, Lena corrected, nudging his arm. A performance note whispered between actors. She's Mom. I wanted to tell them about the first couch we had in this house. The plaid one John hated and I loved because it was free and not broken. I wanted to mention the dent in the hallway where Evan crashed his tricycle at 3. The one I never patched because the house needed a memory that wasn't pretty. I wanted to say this place knows my name. Instead, I said, how much is the rent? Lena brightened, happy to show her work. It's reasonable. We did the math. Between your social security and the money you saved after John's insurance. The money I saved, I repeated, gentle as a blade. And we'll help, of course. Evan rushed. We'll set you up with autopay. We'll handle the paperwork. A slip of paper sat beneath the floor plan. I pulled it free with 2 fingers. A leasing application. The signature line waited like a mouth. Don't worry, Lena said quickly. We filled in most of it for you. It's simpler if we do. I stared at the line. Somewhere a faucet dripped, slow and stubborn. The house breathed under my feet. Do you remember? I asked, my voice steadying against itself. The night your father and I signed the papers for this house? Evan blinked. I was 7. You brought me to the office. I colored in the lobby. You colored the grass purple. I said. You said real grass was boring. He smiled without meaning to. Then it faded. Mom, we're not selling the house. We're just thinking about your comfort. My comfort, I said back. Silence took a chair. We all made room. Lena lifted her phone and turned its screen out. Like showing me a good grade. A photo of a tidy studio, fake bowl of lemons. A knit throw no one would use. It's beautiful, Margaret, and it's yours. It'll be easier on everyone while we start our family. Ah. The truth finally cleared its throat. Start your family, I repeated. My mouth tasted like pennies. And I am, what? Exactly? Evan flinched. Don't do that. Don't make it ugly. You know Lena's been under stress. The appointments. I know, I said. I had held my breath every time a test was late or a doctor looked at a chart too long. I had prayed quietly in the laundry room so they wouldn't hear my hope. I had learned the new language of waiting. I also knew what houses do when new lives arrive. They make space by pushing something out. We'd still see you all the time. Lena said. Sunday dinners. Movie nights. We'll visit. We'll bring the baby when there's a baby. I said. When there's a baby. My being here would be inconvenient. Not inconvenient, Evan said. Just crowded. I set the pamphlet down like it might break. The air felt thinner. Somewhere in the back of my skull. A small, calm woman I did not know yet was taking notes. John would have hated this scene. He had a violent allergy to nice words hiding bad news. He would have reached across this table, taken my hand, and said the truth with the blunt mercy of a man who lifts heavy things for a living. But John was 5 years in the ground, and the people in my kitchen had perfect teeth and softened voices. When? I asked. Evan looked at Lena. Lena looked at the leasing date circled in blue. The 1st, she said. It's best to line up with the billing cycle. The building has a move-in slot at 10 a.m. We thought we'd start boxing this weekend. This weekend. 2 days. What if I say no? I asked. They both stopped a fraction of a breath. It was as if the script did not contain that line. Evan recovered first. Then we'd wait. We'd try again. Mom, we're trying to help you. This is better for you. I looked at my son. He didn't look like the enemy. He looked like a tired man telling himself a story that made him good. I wondered when I had started making it so easy. I don't like elevators, I said. There are stairs, Lena offered, for emergencies. I nearly laughed. The room was full of them. I carried my cup to the sink and held it under the tap, watching the water run brown to clear before I shut it off. Behind me, I could feel their hope vibrating. Please say yes. Please make this simple. Please be the kind of mother who goes quietly and blesses us as she leaves. I'll think, I said. Relief bloomed in their faces. Vulgar in its speed. Evan came around the table and kissed the top of my head like I was already smaller. Thank you, he whispered. Lena exhaled and began to talk about moving supplies. About a friend with a truck. About a thrift store that picks up donations. Practical kindness. Logistics as a lullaby. I excused myself and went down the hall. Our hall. The hall with the scuffed baseboard and the cheap runner and the hook where John's hat used to hang. The door to my room was ajar. Inside, 3 boxes. The closet half empty. Someone had folded my winter sweater with ceremony. As if neat corners could apologize. On my dresser, a photo lay flat where it didn't belong. Our first Christmas in this house. Evan missing his front teeth. John pretending to steal the star. Me in a sweater with fat red snowflakes. holding a pie I had burned and smiling like I could not imagine a day I would be handed a brochure for my own freedom. I sat on the bed and touched the quilt. My mother had sewn it. She would have split the seams with her hands before she let anyone carry it out to a truck. Evan tapped the door with his knuckles. "Mom?" "Come in," I said. He stepped inside like a man entering a church where he is not sure he still believes. "I know this is hard. But it's time. You've done so much for me. Let me do this for you." "Evan," I said, "do you remember your father's laugh?" He smiled despite himself. It filled a room. "It filled this one," I said, the ache not unkind. He would stand right there and say something too loud and you would cover your ears and then laugh anyway. "Do you remember?" "I do." He hated the word, nice. I said. He said it replaced the truth. Evan rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom?" "Say the truth," I asked quietly. "Say it plain, not dressed up." He swallowed. His eyes went soft in a way I recognized. "We need the space," he said, "and Lena is more comfortable when you're not here." That was the truth. Clean. Sharp. Almost merciful. "Thank you," I said. He looked startled. "For what?" "For saying it." He sat beside me. The bed complained at the extra weight. For a second it felt like 20 years ago and he was telling me about a fight on the playground he swore he didn't start. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "No," I said. "You meant to help yourself and hoped it wouldn't hurt me." He shut his eyes. "That's not fair." I didn't say it was. I said it was true. We sat in that truth until it could breathe without us. "Do you want me to call the building?" he asked finally. "We can postpone." I thought of the pamphlet. The staged lemons. The west-facing window. I pictured myself in a room where no one needed me and no one resented needing me. My chest surprised me by expanding, not shrinking. "Call," I said, but not to postpone, to ask questions. Questions? About the lease, about who signs, about who pays, about what happens if I change my mind, about who holds the keys. I looked at him. "I won't be moved like furniture." He nodded. "Of course." "And Evan?" "Yeah?" "Don't pack my things yet." He stood, relieved to have a verb. "Okay." I waited until he'd gone down the hall. His footsteps slower than before. And then I pulled the top box open and took my sweater back out. I folded it the way my mother taught me, right sleeve over left. Touch, smooth, tuck, the human ritual of ownership. Down the hall I heard Lena's voice drop to a whisper sharp enough to shave with. "She's saying yes, don't push." I closed my eyes and let the quiet settle where the grief wanted to be. It didn't feel like defeat. Not yet. It felt like standing at the edge of a map no one had ever drawn for me and realizing I still knew how to walk. That afternoon, I went to see the studio. I went alone. The leasing agent was 26 and wore a blazer that squeaked when she moved. She called me Ms. Cole and offered me water from a plastic bottle with the building's name stamped on it in tasteful gray. The elevator smelled like lemons and money. The 7th floor hallway was carpeted in a pattern meant to hide regret. The studio door opened with a precise click. Inside, white walls, wide window, a kitchen pretending not to be small, a closet more honest than the one at home. "Afternoons are lovely," the agent said. "Sunset is a show." I stepped toward the window and saw the park. Tiny people moved on tiny paths. A dog burst into laughter in the body of a run. The west was already painting itself for later. "What do you think?" she asked. I thought. I could be alone here and not be erased. I thought. I could arrange my cups in a way that pleases no one but me. I thought. Quiet is different when you choose it. "It will do," I said, and the words were stronger than yes. "Wonderful," she chirped. "We'll just need a signature." Just. Always just. "I'll take the paperwork," I said, holding my hands out like a cup. I don't sign on first meetings. Her smile faltered, then recovered. Of course. In the lobby, I saw a notice board. Exercise classes, book club, Tuesday tea, names of strangers who might one day become familiar enough to wave at. Not enough to hurt me. The possibility was almost obscene. On the way home, I walked. No bus, no ride. My niece complained in their old language. And I answered softly, we're going, like a mother in a grocery store aisle. At the house, the boxes had multiplied. The donate one was full of things that did not belong there. My mixing bowl. The one with the chip in the lip where Evan learned to crack his first egg. The quilted table runner John ruined with a coffee spill and I never washed because I wanted the stain to keep us humble. I moved slowly, putting back only what I could carry in one hand. Not a fight, a correction. Lena watched from the doorway. We can buy new, she said. I don't need new, I replied. I need mine. She looked at me like I had spoken a language she did not plan to learn. That night, I lay in the bed that would not be mine much longer and listened to the house make its midnight noises. Pipes negotiated, the heater sighed, somewhere a neighbor's radio murmured about a team that had finally won. In the dark, I spoke to John the way I do when I need courage more than company. They're packing me nicely, I told him. They're using the kind of tape that doesn't leave residue. They're telling themselves they are kind. I waited for whatever comes from the dead when they love you. Maybe it was the heat turning on again. Maybe it was only my heart. But I heard it. Go if you must. But don't go small. I slept. In the morning, I made a list. Ask Arthur, John's old friend, now a retired lawyer, to coffee. Check the deed. Call the bank. Separate my accounts. Keep the quilt. Keep my name. I wrote them in my neatest handwriting. The one I used when Evan was in second grade and I labeled his school things so the world would return them. The world had not kept that promise. But I had. At breakfast, Evan poured me orange juice and asked about the park. Did you like it? I liked the sky, I said. He smiled, relieved. So, we'll move forward? We'll move, I said. Forward is something else. He didn't ask what I meant. Lena talked about something on her calendar. The boxes stared with open mouths. I folded my list and slipped it under my mug like a secret compass. Sometimes the first step of leaving is letting them think they carried you. Sometimes the first step of staying yourself is taking your time. When they left for the day, I stood in the doorway of the guest room and tested the word one last time. Guest. In the house my hands had made. I smiled, small, private, true. Then I began to pack the only things that mattered. Carefully, like I was telling them, we're going somewhere we will be wanted. The house watched. I could feel it. Houses always do. They are made of walls and wires and what you say when you think the people you love can't hear you. I wasn't thinking of revenge. Not then. Revenge is loud and I needed quiet. I was thinking of leases and signatures and the way a pen feels when you are writing your own name for yourself. I was thinking of keys. I taped the first box myself and wrote on it in my own hand. Margaret, bedroom, open first. Not guest. Not keep or donate. Just my name. And somewhere under the floorboards, under the road noise and the dryer's thrum, under Lena's perfect plans and Evan's good intentions, I felt it, like a small door inside me unlocking from the right side for once. I would go. But not small. The house sounds different when you know it's no longer yours. Every creak becomes a goodbye you didn't get to say. I spent that last week moving through the rooms the way a ghost might, careful not to disturb the living. The morning light hit the kitchen tiles just as it did the first day John and I moved in. Back then, we didn't have much. A hand-me-down table, 2 mismatched chairs, and a second-hand toaster that sparked every third use. But it was ours. John always said a house doesn't become a home until you leave something imperfect in it. That's why he never fixed the dent in the pantry door or the tiny chip in the bathroom sink. Proof we lived, he said, not just existed. Now, those dents and chips had been painted over, smoothed out, made presentable. The proof was gone. I ran my hand along the hallway wall, feeling where the paint was thicker. Beneath it, our son's height marks were buried, the years we used to track with a pencil and a kiss on his hair. Evan at 7, Evan at 12, Evan at 16, grinning because he'd finally passed his father. Now, there was no trace. When I reached the living room, Lena's new decor stared back at me. Neutral tones, minimalist, a catalog's idea of serenity. The family photos that used to line the mantel had been reduced to one, our wedding picture, shoved to the side of a vase filled with fake orchids. The rest were boxed, labeled miscellaneous. I had opened that box 2 nights before. Inside, years of laughter, birthdays, graduations, John's retirement party. Every frame had a post-it stuck to the glass. Ask Mom if she wants. The question had already been answered by the handwriting, small, impatient, done with asking. I sat on the couch, her couch. Technically, and the cushion didn't dip the way it used to. It was too firm, too new, the kind of couch that doesn't know how to listen. I closed my eyes and tried to hear the house as it was before. John whistling off-key. The smell of Sunday roast. The faint thud of a basketball in the driveway. The laughter that came in waves and never asked permission to stay. Now, the house had learned to hold its breath. It wasn't always this way. When Evan brought Lena home the first time, she was shy and soft-spoken. She called me Mrs. Hayes for 3 weeks before I told her to stop. I thought she just needed time. John, ever the realist, whispered one night, "She's planning this house like a chessboard. Maggie, don't give up the queen too early." I laughed then. I thought he was teasing. After he died, I gave her the queen. And every square after. It happened slow. She started by helping with the bills. Then with the grocery list. Then with my wardrobe. "Let me modernize you," she'd say, handing me something beige. And somewhere between kindness and control, I disappeared. I told myself it was gratitude. She was taking care of Evan. Managing the home, making sure he ate right. I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who hovered. But every time she rearranged a shelf, it felt like she was rearranging memory. John's chair was the first to go. "Too bulky," she said. "We'll get something ergonomic." Then the curtains, too dark. Then my kitchen radio, outdated. I told myself these were small things. You can lose a few small things and still have a life. But small things, collected long enough, make an absence. That night, before the movers came, I walked into John's old study. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. His books were still there, but not where he left them. Someone had stacked them alphabetically. Spine's uniform, stories stripped of their fingerprints. On the desk sat his old fountain pen, the one he swore had its own soul. It didn't write anymore, but I had kept it because love isn't about usefulness. The nib was clean, the ink bottle empty. Someone had polished it. Someone who didn't know that old things aren't supposed to shine, they're supposed to remember. I picked it up and turned it in my fingers. The weight was familiar, the silence wasn't. Sometimes I think grief never really leaves a house, it just hides in the wiring, waiting for the lights to go out. When Evan came home from work, he looked tired. He saw me sitting there, pen in hand, and smiled the way sons do when they want their mothers to be small again. "You okay?" he asked. I was, I said, until I realized the house doesn't know me anymore. He frowned. "Mom, it's just furniture." "No," I said, "it's language." He didn't understand. He nodded anyway. The universal sign for please don't make this hard. Later that night, I heard them whispering in their room. She's being sentimental, Lena said. She's scared, Evan replied. She'll be fine. The apartment's perfect. Their voices were muffled, like the house was trying to protect me from their kindness. I went back to the study and sat on the floor with John's boxes. His handwriting still lived there, on tax forms, letters, grocery lists. He had a habit of writing "remember milk" even when we had plenty. Just to make sure we didn't forget something essential. That night, I dreamed of him standing in the doorway, his hand on the frame. Let them think they're moving you out, he said in that calm way of his. Because they can't move what they don't own. I woke before dawn. The street outside was empty, but a bird had started to sing somewhere. Not the kind of pretty song that fills space, but the kind that marks it. This is mine. This is mine. This is mine. I whispered to the dark. Me too. When the movers arrived that morning, Lena supervised. Evan carried boxes like a man trying to prove something. I didn't interfere. I only took one box from the stack and placed it in my car myself. The one labeled Margaret, bedroom, open first. On the back seat sat the pen, the photo, and John's hat. Nothing else made the cut. As we drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, shrinking into something too neat to hold the years we left inside it. Do you want to say goodbye? Evan asked. I looked at the window, our window, and said. I already did. It just took me 20 years to finish. The car turned the corner. The street disappeared. And for the first time in a long time, the echo of home didn't follow me. It stayed behind, where it belonged. The first night in the new apartment was too quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. Like silence had finally collected all its unpaid rent and come knocking. I lay on a mattress that still smelled of plastic, staring at the ceiling where a faint shadow from the streetlight pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Every sound was foreign, the hum of a fridge that wasn't mine. The footsteps from upstairs, the occasional hiss of plumbing reminding me I wasn't alone, just lonely. They call it independence when it happens to the young. When it happens to the old, they call it adjustment. I unpacked slowly. The quilt went first, John's stitches still uneven where he'd tried to help one winter night. Pricking his fingers and swearing under his breath until I laughed him back to calm. I spread it over the bed like a treaty between past and present. Then the photo, John in his work overalls. Evan at 5 sitting on his shoulders. Both of them squinting into sunlight so bright it looked like joy itself. I propped it on the windowsill. The window was west-facing. Just like Lena promised, the sunset was a decent consolation prize for betrayal. The studio was small, one room pretending to be 3. A kitchenette that could barely hold a thought. A bathroom the size of an apology. And a window big enough to make the emptiness look artistic. I tried to make it mine. A plant, a cup, a routine. Morning tea at 7. A walk at 9. Lunch when the loneliness got loud enough to mistake for hunger. Neighbors came and went, polite smiles in passing, no names, just nods, the currency of strangers who don't want to owe conversation. After the first week, Evan called every other day. The first few calls were filled with logistics. Did the cable guy come? How's the stove? Did you set up online banking yet? Each question sounded like care. Each answer made me smaller. Yes, Evan. I'm fine, Evan. No, Evan, I don't need anything. He never asked if I missed home. Maybe because he already knew the answer. One morning, I went down to check the mail. Bills, flyers, a letter from the management office. Inside, a reminder, rent due on the 1st. Paid by auto draft, as arranged by my son. At first, it seemed kind, one less thing to worry about. But the next line made my chest tighten. Account holder. E. Hayes. Evan. Not me. I reread it twice, just to be sure. The apartment, the one that was supposed to be mine, was leased in his name. I was, in every sense of the word, a guest again. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hum of the fridge grew louder, almost mocking. I opened the cabinet where I kept my tea, counted the cups like proof I still owned something. One chipped mug, one plain white, one I didn't recognize, bought by someone else, from a store I hadn't entered. I called the bank the next morning, pretending it was about a lost check. The woman on the phone was kind in that professional way that makes kindness feel like policy. "Can I confirm your secondary on file?" she asked. Secondary? Yes, ma'am. We have two authorized users, M. Hayes and E. Hayes. My breath caught. When was that added? About 4 months ago. It says the request came through during hospitalization. Hospitalization. The fall, the surgery, the fog of painkillers when signatures became suggestions. I thanked her, hung up, and sat very still. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls knew something I didn't. On the table, I kept the leasing packet, the one Lena had filled out, for convenience. I flipped through it. Every page neatly typed, every signature printed with care. At the bottom of the last page, a name, mine, shaky, familiar, but not in my hand. The same pen stroke, but younger. Firmer. Evans. He had practiced my signature once, I remembered it now. Back in high school, he'd forged a permission slip for a field trip. I laughed then, because he wanted to go see the planetarium. "You have my permission, but don't ever do that again," I'd said. He promised. Children always mean it when they promise. Until they don't. I stared at the page until the letters blurred. My name, written by someone who thought I wouldn't notice. It was almost elegant, betrayal in cursive. The next day, I called Beverly. She was the neighbor from 2 doors down back at the old street, the one who brought casseroles when John died and gossip when the silence got too heavy. "Margaret, dear," she said, her voice like warm soup. "How's the new place treating you?" "It's quiet," I said, "too quiet." "Well, that's what you wanted, isn't it?" "I wanted peace," I said. I didn't ask for erasure. She didn't understand, but she listened. That was enough. After the call, I walked to the park. It was a small thing, a square of grass fenced by benches and pigeons with big opinions. I sat there for an hour, maybe 2, watching people move through their days. Nobody looked at me, nobody needed me. The freedom I'd been promised felt a lot like exile. When I came home, there was a voicemail. Lena's voice, cheerful, crisp. "Hi, Margaret, just checking in. Evan's been worried. Did you get your rent notice? Don't stress, it's all automatic. We're handling it, okay? Love you. We're handling it." The words slid under my skin like a splinter. I replayed the message 3 times, just to hear how easily she said, "love." The kind of love that signs checks in someone else's name. That night, I took out John's pen again. It still didn't write, but the weight of it steadied me. I used a ballpoint instead and started a list. Check bank authorization. Verify house deed. Visit county clerk. Ask Arthur for advice. Arthur Dawson, John's old friend from the plant. He'd retired as an attorney for the company before moving to the coast. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I still had his number scribbled in an old address book. I hesitated before dialing. The clock read 9:14 p.m. Decent people were asleep. But I wasn't decent anymore, I was awake with purpose. "Margaret?" His voice was gravel and warmth. "Been a long time." "Too long," I said. "What's wrong?" "Someone signed my name," I whispered, "and I think it wasn't the first time." He was silent for a moment. Then, calm as ever. Don't confront them yet. Bring me everything. We'll start from there. I wrote down his address. Coastal town, 2 hours away. When I hung up, the silence didn't feel so heavy. It felt like air before a storm, charged, alive, waiting. I looked at the paper on the table. The lease, the forged signature, my name stolen and borrowed at the same time. I folded it neatly and slipped it into an envelope. Tomorrow, I'd visit Arthur. But that night, I did something small and deliberate. I turned off the fridge. Let it stop humming for once. Let the silence know I was listening back. Because peace, I realized, doesn't come from leaving noise behind. It comes from knowing whose voice you'll hear when you finally break it. I didn't sleep that night. The letter wouldn't let me. It began the way all forgiveness begins, not with peace, but with noise. The noise of everything unsaid. The sound of every word I swallowed so someone else could eat comfortably. I made tea at 2 a.m., poured it into the chipped mug I'd brought from the old house, and sat by the window while the city slept without guilt. The pen was ready. So was I. At the top of the page, I wrote his name. Evan. Then stopped. Because how do you address someone who still calls you, Mom, but signs your name like it's his? The paper waited. And when I finally began, my hand didn't shake. Blank, underscore, blank. My dear son. If you ever find this letter, though I doubt you will, I want you to know I started writing it not out of anger, but out of ache. The kind of ache that sits too deep for shouting and too familiar for tears. I don't hate you. I don't even know how to. I think hate requires distance, and I've never been far enough from you to learn it. I do remember, though, the night you were born. Your father held you like a secret he'd been trusted to keep. He told me you looked like the sunrise, fragile, but impossible to ignore. We promised then that no matter how hard life got, you'd never feel alone. Funny thing, promises. They keep their shape even when the people who made them don't. I used to think my silence was a gift, the kind mothers give to keep the peace. But silence, I've learned, is a kind of permission. And I've given you far too much of it. You think you're protecting me. Maybe. That's what you tell yourself when you forge a name or move a signature. You tell yourself it's mercy. But mercy without truth is just control in polite clothing. I want you to understand something, Evan. When I say I'm hurt, it isn't because you took money or a house. It's because you took the meaning of home and made it paperwork. You turned care into management. Love into logistics. And me, into a responsibility you could delegate. I don't need your apology. I need you to remember who you were before convenience made you clever. Do you remember when you were 8, and you broke your father's watch? You cried for hours until he found you under the porch. He didn't yell, he sat beside you and said, "Everything that breaks in this house can be fixed. Except trust." You nodded, and you meant it. Where did that boy go? Maybe I failed you. Maybe I raised you to be too careful, too afraid of struggle. Maybe I shielded you so much that you thought comfort was love. If that's true, then I'm sorry. Not for the protection, but for the blindness. I can forgive you for stealing my name. But you'll have to live with the fact that I'm taking it back. I still love you, Evan. That's the cruel part of motherhood. Love doesn't vanish even when respect does. But I can't keep living inside the cage you built out of good intentions. So I'm leaving it unlocked. If you ever grow brave enough, you can walk out too. Until then, I'll be somewhere quiet. Where my name still means me. Love. Mom. Blank, underscore, blank. When I finished, I folded the letter once, neatly, like an offering. I stared at it for a long time. It looked small, too small to carry what it held. I set it on the table beside the teacup and watched the sunrise creep across the paper. The ink shimmered, then dulled, like a wound cooling. I thought about mailing it. I even reached for an envelope. Then I stopped. Because some truths aren't meant to travel. They're meant to stay where you finally said them, even if no one else hears. I tore the letter in half. The sound was clean, final, almost kind. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "He knows enough." Then I lit the kettle again, poured new water, and waited for the silence to boil. Out the window, a bird landed on the sill, same one from before. Maybe. It pecked twice, looked at me, then flew away. And for a strange, fleeting moment, I thought, maybe love is like that. It visits, it wounds, it leaves. And it still belongs to you when it's gone. I swept the torn paper into the trash. Not to forget, but to make space. Because the past, like tea leaves, only gives you its strength when you let it go. Arthur lived by the sea. His house sat on a small cliff, wind-burned and honest. When I arrived, he already had the kettle on. "You brought it?" he asked. I slid the envelope across the table, the lease, the forged papers, the proof. He didn't speak for a long time. Just read, underlined, hummed. Finally he said, "This isn't just forgery, Margaret, it's control, the kind that hides behind care." I nodded. "I'm not after punishment," I said, "I just want my name back." He smiled, "That's sad. Knowing lawyers smile. Then we'll start there." 2 weeks later, the letters went out. One to the bank, revoking all shared authorizations. One to the county clerk, contesting every document with my signature. And one, hand-delivered, to Evan. It wasn't a letter of anger. It was a notice of correction. Property title dispute, filed. Bank account access, revoked. Power of attorney, terminated. Simple, clean, legal. But inside it, years of silence finally had grammar. Evan called that night. His voice cracked halfway through the first sentence. "Mom, what is this?" "Clarity," I said. "You didn't have to." "I did," I interrupted, "because I'm done being managed like an account that forgot its password." He said nothing. I could hear Lena in the background, whispering, "She can't do that." But I could. And I did. Arthur handled the rest. 3 meetings, 2 hearings, 1 frozen account later, everything shifted. The house returned to my name. The lease moved under mine alone. The bank reversed every unauthorized transaction. The numbers didn't matter. The principle did. When Arthur handed me the final papers, he said, "Congratulations, Margaret, you're officially yourself again." I laughed, a small, surprised laugh. Imagine needing legal documents to prove you exist. A month passed before I saw Evan again. He showed up on a Sunday morning, standing in the doorway of my little apartment like a boy who had lost his shoes. "Can I come in?" he asked. The tea kettle answered before I did. He sat at the small table, hands shaking, eyes red. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "I just thought that I wouldn't notice," I finished. He flinched. "I thought you'd be safer if I handled things." "No," I said softly, "you thought you'd be safer if I didn't." The silence that followed was long, but not cruel. Just honest. Lena didn't come with him. Arthur said she'd already signed the settlement papers, walked away from everything but her pride. Evan slid an envelope across the table. Inside, a check for the first repayment. $500. It's a start, he said. It is, I replied. He stood, but didn't leave right away. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I already did, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. It just means I'm free. He nodded slowly. Then, for the first time in years, he called me Mom without guilt in his voice. When the door closed behind him, the apartment didn't feel small anymore. It felt right-sized for one person who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. That evening, Beverly came by with a bottle of lemonade and the latest neighborhood gossip. Arthur dropped off a manila folder, the official closure notice. Case settled, he said, justice served quietly. He was right. No handcuffs, no headlines. Just balance, restored. I walked them to the door. The air outside smelled like rain and something cleaner, peace. Maybe. When I came back in, I looked at the single-framed photo on my wall. John, Evan, and me, back when home was still a place. Not a contract. I smiled, touched the glass, and whispered. We did it, love, we made it right. A week later, I sold the apartment. Arthur found a buyer, Beverly helped me pack. Then I bought a small cottage near the coast, sunlight in every room. Garden big enough for roses and silence. When the movers left, I stood in the doorway and breathed. The sea wind came through like forgiveness itself. I unpacked one box, just one. Inside, John's pen, my quilt, the chipped mug, and the photo. Everything else could wait. That night, I brewed tea and watched the tide erase its own footprints. The world was still unfair, but no longer unkind. And for the first time in years, I felt like I didn't owe anyone an explanation for surviving. The sea teaches you how to listen again. It doesn't demand answers. It just speaks in repetitions, wave, pause, until your heartbeat finally remembers how to be quiet. I moved here 3 months ago. A small cottage by the shore, white curtains, chipped blue paint, and a garden that insists on living no matter how salty the air gets. Some mornings, I wake up before dawn just to hear the tide shift, that soft inhale the world takes before forgiving itself. My days are simple now. Tea at sunrise. Reading on the porch until the light turns gold. A walk along the beach where footprints never last longer than the next wave. Sometimes I still talk to John. Out loud. The ocean doesn't mind eavesdropping. I tell him about the cottage. About Arthur's terrible handwriting. About Beverly's stubborn roses that refuse to die even when the wind claws at them. And sometimes, about Evan. He calls once a week. No money talk, no guilt. Just questions that sound almost like the boy he used to be. How's the garden, Mom? Are you eating well? Do you still make that lemon tea Dad liked? I don't tell him I do. I just smile and let the sound of his voice be enough. Because maybe that's what forgiveness really is. The choice to love someone's better echo. Not their worst mistake. There's a bench by the cliff where I sit most evenings. It faces west, toward everything that ends beautifully if you're patient enough. I watch the sun slide into the horizon, its last light spilling over the water like memory too tired to fight back. Once, I found a shell half buried in the sand. Inside, there was a small pearl, imperfect, gray, but real. It wasn't beautiful because it was flawless. It was beautiful because it survived the irritation that made it. So did I. I keep that shell on the windowsill, right beside John's pen. Neither of them work anymore, but both remind me that creation and endurance are just two ways of saying the same thing. Last week, a letter came in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Inside, a short note. Mom, I saw the house today, the old one. It doesn't feel like ours anymore. But maybe that's okay. I hope the sea is kind to you. Love. E. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand, but because sometimes forgiveness sounds best when it's written without apology. I folded it carefully, slipped it between the pages of an old novel, and whispered to the room. He's learning. That night, I walked down to the beach barefoot. The sand was cold, the water colder. The moon hung low, white as forgiveness. I stood there a long time, until the tide reached my ankles. And I said softly to the dark, I'm home now. The wind carried it away, as if to tell the sea, the storm is over. Some storms end quietly, not with thunder, but with a whisper that says, I'm still here. If you were Margaret, would you have forgiven them? Or closed that door forever? Tell me in the comments below. Because every family hides a story we're still learning how to forgive.